Ever look at like a map of congressional districts
Oh, yeah.
and kind of think, wow, that's a really weird shape.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Someone had a very, very strange idea of what a community should look like.
Right.
So today we are doing a deep dive into a situation that might just explain some of that head scratching, when you look at these maps.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be focusing on the practice of gerrymandering and more specifically what seems to be like a pretty candid admission about it in the state of Florida.
That's right. And the source that we're going to be looking at today comes from a transcript of a YouTube video by the Ring of Fire. And it's a report on a statement that was made by Florida's chief financial officer, Jimmy Patronis.
Yeah, so our mission for this deep dive, pretty straightforward.
Okay.
We want to try and understand like what gerrymandering is and how it was used in Florida, according to this source at least.
Yeah.
And why this particular admission is, well, noteworthy. So this YouTube transcript, it details a Republican primary candidate forum, and it was organized by the Navarre Republican Women's Club.
Okay.
And it was at this forum that Jimmy Patronis, who is Florida's current chief financial officer, made a statement that is generating quite a bit of discussion.
Yes. And the statement that's attributed to Patronis is this, and I quote, "Do you know why District 1 is where it is? It's because a Republican legislature is in charge right now, and this is what we've done since Daniel Webster was Speaker of the House as a Republican. We try to create as many Republican congressional seats as possible."
Wow.
Okay.
That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's a very direct statement. It's like, we did this.
Yeah.
And
it's pretty striking because a lot of times this is something that is suspected, but to hear someone just outright admit to it,
right,
it's really unusual. And the YouTube host, you can really hear it in their voice. They were very surprised by the just blatant admission of it.
Right.
Yeah, they actually said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something like, we all knew this was happening, but to just come out and admit, like, hey, you want to know why this is the way it is because we made it this way? We gerrymandered it to keep Democrats out and us in power.
Exactly.
So it was, a very direct assessment.
Well, and it might be helpful for the listener to just kind of understand what we're talking about when we say gerrymandering.
Yeah. What is it?
So essentially, it is the manipulation of electoral boundaries. And the purpose of doing this is to give one party or candidate an advantage over their opponents.
So you're drawing the lines on the map in a way.
Literally drawing the lines on the map in a way that benefits you. And so there's a couple of strategies that are often used in gerrymandering. One of them is known as packing, and that's where you concentrate as many voters from the opposing party as you can into just a few districts. So they win those districts, but they're not competitive in other districts.
Okay, so you're backing them all in.
Packing them all in. So they get a few wins, but they can't win enough to take control. And then the other strategy is known as cracking, and that's where you spread the opposing party's voters out among many different districts so that they're always a minority and they're unlikely to win any of them.
So you're diluting their vote.
Exactly. You're diluting their vote, so it really reduces their overall power.
It makes a lot of sense now that I hear you describe it. I mean, I've heard the term before.
Right.
But I never really thought about the mechanics of it.
Right.
And now that makes a lot of sense.
So it seems like the admission here is pointing to a strategy of creating reliably Republican districts.
Yeah. And it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
When we think about the context of why Patronis might have made this statement.
Okay.
Because the YouTube transcript points out that he's actually running for the congressional seat in Florida's District 1.
Okay.
But he doesn't live there.
Oh.
He lives in Panama City, which is District 2.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this kind of gets into like this weird part of U.S. law that you don't actually have to live in the district that you're running for in Congress.
Mm-hmm. It is strange. Yeah. And it's something that the YouTube host definitely took issue with. And I'll just quote them directly here. "I'm sorry, but if you don't think that's the dumbest thing ever, then I don't know what it, like, you could be living in South Florida right now, which, trust me, is night and day from Northwest Florida here, and you could still become our representative."
Well, yeah, it does seem a little strange. I mean, it's not my place to say what the law should be, but
right.
I could see how it might seem a little odd.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the YouTube host actually offers a theory as to why Patronis would kind of so blatantly admit to this gerrymandering.
Okay.
And the idea is that by acknowledging it, he's appealing to Republican primary voters in District 1 by saying, hey, we're the ones in charge. We're the ones who created this district, so it makes sense that you would elect another Republican even if I don't live here.
So he's basically saying, I'm your guy because we made this seat for a guy like me.
Right, exactly. And it might be a way of kind of sidestepping the whole carpetbagger issue.
Right. So it's interesting because it's not just a politician running for office. It's almost like a validation of partisan manipulation as like a legitimate political tactic.
Yeah, I mean, that's the interpretation that the YouTube host is offering, and it's hard to argue with that when you hear the statement in the context of the election.
Right. It makes you wonder, though, is it possible that he really just believes that this is how politics is done
Yeah.
and he's just being transparent?
I mean, it's possible, but it's difficult to know for sure what his true motivation is.
Right. Well, okay. So how did this admission go over with like his opponents, according to the YouTube commentary?
Predictably, his Republican opponents have used this against him, calling him a carpetbagger, as you might expect.
Yeah.
But despite this criticism, the YouTube host prediction is that Petronis is still likely to win the primary.
Really? Why is that?
Well, they point to a couple of things. First off, he has much higher name recognition because he's the current CFO of Florida.
Right. He's got that name recognition.
Exactly. And secondly, he's the only candidate running television ads right now. So, if you're the only one on TV, people are going to know your name.
Right. So the YouTube host is basically saying he's probably going to win.
Pretty much, yeah. And you can really hear the frustration in their voice because, they feel like they're going to be represented by somebody who's not really from their community, especially after their previous representative resigned.
So it's a frustrating situation.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
For sure. So, this whole idea of drawing these weird district lines to favor one party or the other,
Yeah.
it does make you wonder, like, what happens when this kind of thing becomes the norm?
It's a great question, and it's something that a lot of people are concerned about because when you have gerrymandering, it can really lead to less competitive elections.
Oh, how so?
Well, because the districts are drawn in a way that guarantees one party is going to win. It almost doesn't matter who the candidates are.
Oh, so it's kind of already decided before the voters even go to the polls.
Yeah, essentially. And that can lead to lower voter turnout and make the elected officials less accountable to their constituents.
Because they know they're going to win no matter what.
Exactly. It creates this kind of sense of apathy where people feel like their vote doesn't really matter.
It makes you wonder, like, are we really choosing our representatives, or are the lines on the map choosing them for us?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's something that we all need to be thinking about.
So the YouTube host was also pretty upset about this whole residency thing.
Yeah.
Which makes me think, should there be stricter rules about where a congressional candidate needs to live?
It's an interesting debate, and there are arguments to be made on both sides.
Sure.
The people who support residency requirements, they argue that representatives should really understand the communities they represent, and they should be connected to those communities.
Right, so they can represent their needs.
Exactly. But then the other side argues that if you limit the pool of candidates based on residency, you might be excluding some really qualified people.
Oh, so you're limiting the choices.
Exactly. And they also say that ultimately it should be up to the voters to decide who they want to represent them.
Regardless of where they happen to live.
Yeah, that's their argument.
Okay, so to kind of sum it all up for our listeners today, we did a deep dive into this YouTube transcript from the Ring of Fire.
That's right.
And according to this transcript, this high-ranking Florida Republican official, Jimmy Petronis, he's quoted as saying that basically his party gerrymandered the state's congressional districts to benefit Republicans.
And he said this while he was campaigning for a seat in a district where he doesn't even live.
Right, which is a whole other can of worms. But yeah, so the YouTube host, they saw this as a calculated move, to appeal to Republican primary voters.
Right, and to kind of solidify the idea that this district is a Republican district.
Right, and this all raises some very important questions about, how these districts are drawn and what it means when we're creating these districts that aren't competitive.
Yeah, I mean, is this really what democracy should look like?
Right. Are the voters really the ones choosing? Yeah. Or are the lines on the map choosing?
Exactly, and what does that mean for the future of our political system?
So here's a final thought for you all listening today.
Okay.
What does it mean for our democracy when we have politicians openly admitting to manipulating these electoral boundaries?
Right.
For their own benefit.
Is that transparency or is that something else?
Right. And then what are the long-term effects going to be, when voters start to lose trust in the system?
And what does it do to our political landscape when the very maps that are supposed to represent us are actually being used as weapons?
Yeah. So we really encourage you all to think about this. Think about what role these districts play in shaping our political outcomes and how can we ensure that our elections are truly fair.
Absolutely. It's a conversation that we need to be having.
That's for sure. All right. That's it for this deep dive.
Until next time.
Take care.
See ya.